Sixth meeting of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, and we turn to our ombudsman, Mr. Ziemba.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, I'm joined by Janice Riley, Paul Connolly, and Jill Griffin to provide an update regarding the Region C RFA2 evaluation process and to discuss the estimated schedule. By Tuesday's deadline, we received letters of assent to designation as a surrounding community from the 8 geographically adjacent communities that were designated in the mass gaming and entertainment application. In addition, we received one petition from a community, Pembroke, wishing to be designated as a surrounding community. Pursuant to our regulations, MG&E has 10 days to respond to the Pembroke petition. As we received it on Thursday, October 8th, MG&E has until Monday, October 19th to respond. By the petition deadline, we also received a number of impacted live entertainment venue petitions that Jill will detail. As you know, MG&E, Ilab Petitions and surrounding community petitioners can provide further information during presentations that they make at a meeting of the commission. This is the so-called surrounding community Ilab presentation day, where both the applicant and the petitioners provide their best case on why they should or should not be designated. Before I ask Janice to give you a briefing on our administrative completeness process, I just bring your attention to a request that we received from MG&E for a 2-week delay in our 90-minute presentations. MG&E, pursuant to the letter, they need more time to put together their presentation. Just as a reminder of what this 90-minute presentation is, the 90-minute presentation, it's different from the hearings that the Commission conducts, either the host community hearings or the surrounding community hearings, in that this is an opportunity for the applicant to provide their best case and their best review of their application, including whatever invitees they have as part of that 90-minute presentation. But this is not the time for extensive public input that we provide through the surrounding community reviews and through the host community reviews, in addition to the tremendous number of comments that we received in writing, either through email or through letter, that we review throughout our evaluation process. Anyway, even though there is no public testimony, there is very valuable information that is presented at these 90-minute presentations. And specifically, this information could be very valuable to petitioners, to Ilab, so-called impacted live entertainment venue, Ilab petitioners, and surrounding community petitioners. They can listen to the petitions and incorporate whatever information they get into whatever presentations they may make during that presentation day. Thus, as a result, you'll see that I've included a draft schedule in your packet that moves forward and makes adjustment to our schedule to basically, in essence, move forward that presentation schedule by Ilab petitioners and surrounding community petitioners to adjust to the new date that is proposed by MG&E. Let me just highlight a couple of dates that would change as a result of the MG&E request to move the presentation, the 90-minute presentation, to November 5th. So with the November 5th presentation, instead of the current October 22nd, we moved the surrounding community Ilab presentations to November 12th instead of October 28th. The potential date for a decision on a Category 1 license becomes March 31st instead of March 18th under the current schedule. And just as a reminder, all of these are estimated dates, and the March 18th date, the March 31st date, the basis for those dates would be if we have at least one petitioner that goes all the way through the arbitration process until the very end of arbitration, and then we have to make our decision after that. If indeed MG is successful in reaching agreement with either the Ilab petitioners or the surrounding community petitioner, we can make adjustments to that schedule. But the March 18th date, the March 31st date, they are predicated upon at least one of the petitioners going all the way through arbitration with MG&E. The schedule that I present to you is presented as a draft, or we could finalize the schedule at a next meeting. You could direct staff to more concretely finalize the schedule. When some of the things that we would need to do is we just want to check our math. Our regulations, as you know, are a little bit complicated when it comes to counting days. How do holidays fit? If a day falls on a Sunday, if it falls on a Monday. So it usually takes many, many iterations of reviews just to make sure that we get it right. In addition, we'd like to further double check within all of the commission's schedules for the near term and also for the longer term. We've attempted to do that with some of the dates. For example, we have penciled in December 10th as the date for determinations on surrounding communities and determinations on Ilab petitions. And then after that date, that would commence the statutory negotiation period. That December 10th date, as we work with Janice, would be a regular commission meeting to the degree that we think that we can't accomplish the reviews of the number of Ilab petitions and the surrounding community petition within the context of a regular meeting. Perhaps we'd want to adjust that. But as of now, it appears that potentially we could do that. So even though I'm not asking you to approve the revised schedule if you go along with MG&E's recommendation, I do ask that you approve of the dates of the 90-minute presentation, at least the fact that we would move the 90-minute presentation from its current date of October 22nd, and the potential date for the Ilab surrounding community petitions. And then as part of any future review of our schedule, we could examine more concretely a date for our surrounding community reviews, our surrounding community hearing. In all likelihood, we probably shouldn't schedule that until after we know a little bit more about the status of negotiations between the applicant and the surrounding communities, whether or not they've been able to reach agreements in the near future or not. And then we could also review the dates for our host community hearing. As you know, normally what we have had is we've had a host community hearing that begins, we recess, and then we conclude the host community hearing after all the arbitrations have been concluded. The host community hearing included in the draft schedule and in our current schedule is sort of well into next year. We obviously have some ability to move that if we think that would be advisable. So with that, I ask for your input on the MG&E request.
Thoughts?
I think it's very reasonable to to be accommodating in this very modest request. I think just like you outlined, there's a few moving pieces, and we can easily deal with those as they come to fruition. There was the period of negotiations between the applicant and the surrounding communities and ILEFs before had us go through the Christmas holidays. They shift a little bit. They're still there. I don't know that it makes any difference, really. But the parties still need to go through that period to get things done, ideally. So I'm on board with what you've outlined here and with that request.
My only thought, I think it's an entirely reasonable request too, but my only thought was the same one that Commissioner Zuniga just mentioned. The prior schedule, and I hadn't noticed this before, had that negotiation period ending on December 30, right after on New Year's Eve, almost on New Year's Eve. This now pushes it out to January 12. You still have about 2 weeks that's very hard in there. But depending on the nature of the negotiations and the nature of the issues that are dividing the parties, that may not be a problem. And I take it that we'd be prepared to deal with it in some fashion if somebody came forward, one of the surrounding communities or the MG&E, and said for some reason having to do with the holidays, they just couldn't get it done.
One benefit of actually moving forward the schedule a couple of weeks is that it extends the, for lack of a better word, the unofficial negotiation period before the 30-day statutory negotiation period kicks in. So in essence, the negotiation period is extended by another couple of weeks. But again, yeah, that was a difficulty under our previous schedule, that
Right.
you had the holidays right in the middle of that 30-day statutory negotiation period. This one may provide you some weeks after that period, but again, it's in the middle. So I take your point, Commissioner, that's something we
Right.
could look at.
Right. Okay. We don't need a vote here. This is just a discussion item at the moment, and.
And I can inform the applicant that we will move forward the 90-minute presentation.
Right, for
and
the,
that,
for the 2-week period.
and that,
Well, Just, Commissioner, just a minute. Commissioner Stebbins, did you want to weigh in on that issue?
No, I'm all set.
All right.
I'm John Donnelly on behalf of MGC. Thank you very much. John Donnelly on behalf of MGA&E. Thank you very much for the consideration. Thanks, staff, for working with us on it.
All right, Mr. Donnelly?
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly.
okay, so there's no new information? Okay, okay. Sorry. Okay. With that, let me turn to Janice, who'll give a little bit more about our administrative completeness review.
All right, our Chief of Staff, Janice Riley.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Just wanted to give you a brief update on where we stand with the application. The administrative completeness review has been completed. And I'm going to ask Paul Conley to address that because his team was actually the one who completed it. And after that, I can give you an update on what next steps are.
Great.
All right, Director Connolly?
Thank you, Commissioners. I just wanted to provide a brief update on the process and where we stand and some next steps that Janice will touch on. So as you well know, the standard of review is outlined in 205 CMR 118. It's an administrative completeness review. How we approached that was to ensure, one, that every question was answered, and two, that every question responded to the questions that were asked. Importantly, we did not do a review on the quality of the response. It was more to say, was it responsive to what was asked, so that upon further review, there's no one who, no reviewer would pick it up and say, they may have provided an answer, but it didn't address what we were looking for. So that was the standard we used. The team, the licensing team, I just wanted to mention a few people who were involved to thank them for their efforts. Kathy Barch, Bill Curtis, Paul McGrath from Investigations and Enforcement provided review with the financial section. Todd Grossman from Legal provided tremendous help on the legal end. And obviously, John and Janice were deeply involved in the process, as well as myself. We split the sections up so that each section was reviewed by an individual reviewer. Then a second team member went through and did a secondary review to just confirm what was found the first time. And we collectively discussed all the deficiencies that were found. Ultimately, I assembled them into a deficiency letter that was sent out this past Tuesday, the 13th, to Attorney Donnelly, who spoke earlier. I called him and confirmed that it would be on its way, discussed at a very high level what was in it. And he and I have subsequently spoken, and there were no issues with the letter, its contents, and they're currently working on addressing all of the issues that were found. Importantly, because the nature of the deficiencies were deemed to be what's called non-material, they have 14 days from the 13th, close of business 13th, it was sent out, so they have until the close of business on the 27th to respond.
So the I've forgotten this now, we haven't done this for a while. The administrative completeness stamp, if you will, is imposed at the end of that 14-day period if the responses to your letter are acceptable.
That's correct. There is an alternative path. If the applicant feels that they cannot respond to one of the deficiencies, they can ask that it still be deemed administratively complete, at which point we'd forward that decision to the commission, to the reviewers, and you would be able to consider those kind of outstanding items. As it stands, and part of the reason why we didn't put the deficiency letter in the packet and I didn't send it to the commissioners is, ideally, if all of those are cured, theoretically, the review team doesn't even know they exist, so to
Right,
speak.
right.
But if they were to say, we can't actually answer that, but we would still like you to deem it administratively complete, it would go forward for further review,
Right.
and you'd be able to consider those as
Right. Okay.
outstanding items, so to speak.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
So with that, we'll continue with the process of posting the application onto the website. The posting will include everything with the exception of anything that's been marked confidential and anything that is still in the review process with Paul's team. So that will begin today and tomorrow to get the rest of the application posted. And then working with Dan McDonald to get the application loaded up onto SharePoint so that when the review process is complete, the administrative completeness review process, we can send the applications to the evaluation teams.
So what's posted will be what's been deemed to be,
Administratively complete at this
yeah,
point.
so there'll be pieces of it that will not be posted in the next couple of days. They won't be posted until the end of the month.
Till the end of the month.
Right, okay.
But in any event, nothing that's confidential will be posted.
Nothing
to
that's
say-
Right.
confidential.
Right. Okay.
Great. Perhaps Jill can give us a little bit of a summary regarding the Ilab petitions.
Can I mention something briefly on the, once again, great work, thorough, very double set of eyes and, careful analysis at the front end. So thank you for all your work.
Commissioners, two nonprofit organizations have submitted Ilab petitions on behalf of 5 different venues. So the
That's impacted live entertainment. and-
impacted live entertainment venues,
Right.
yes, sorry.
No, no,
And
that's all right.
So Brockton 21st Century Corporation has submitted on behalf of Campanelli Stadium and Shaw's Center, both in Brockton. And we have the Mass Performing Arts Council has submitted on behalf of 3 different venues. The South Shore Playhouse, doing business as South Shore Music Circus in Cohasset, and Cape Cod Melody Tent in Hyannis. Additionally, Lynn Auditorium in Lynn, Mass., and the Zeiterion Theater in New Bedford. So as John mentioned, MG&E has 10 days to respond to these petitions, and so on October 23rd, close of business, we should get their response.
Great.
Jill, remind me, were any of these either prior petitioners or prior designated ILETs?
So the Mass Performing Arts Council has submitted petitions on behalf of, I believe, Linda Auditorium and the South Shore Playhouse. And the others, I think, are
Okay.
newly in the mix.
All right, any further discussion? It looks like this is right on track, and so thank all of you and your teams for the hard work that's gone into it, and we move on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next we have Dr. Lightbaum from the Racing Division.
All right, good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon. So first I'll talk about the licenses that we received for racing for next year, for 2016. We received 4 licenses, Plain Ridge, Suffolk Downs, and then 2 for the Brockton Fairgrounds, Brockton, and the Middleborough Fairs.
These are
You mean
license applications.
Yes.
Yeah. You just got a chorus here.
Yes.
Plain Ridge has asked for the 115 days that they need to do with the gaming legislation. They're going to start April 11th and go through November 29th. There's multiple different days, and also, I won't go through the whole thing, but for the most part, it's 4 days a week. There's a few different times during the year where it's 3 days a week to reflect the general horse population in the area. And again, they'll have a 1 o'clock post until the fall when they'll, a 4 o'clock post until the fall when they'll move to a 1 o'clock post. Suffolk Downs has asked for 1 weekend of Saturday, Sunday, July 9th and 10th. And they are intending to pick 2 other weekends one in August, and one in September to ask for, so for a total of 6 days. Brockton has asked, they've asked for 15 days at the Brockton Fairgrounds, starting July 1st, and generally running over Thursday, Friday, Saturday for the month, for 15 days, and then Middleborough starting in August, again doing the 3-day weekends through September. So now we're scheduling the hearings with the legal department in the towns that the tracks are located in, and we'll post the applications to the website. And then before the November 15th date at our meeting, probably the November 12th meeting, we'll present the licenses and what we had at the hearings for the commissioners to vote on.
All right.
Can you mention again the third application? It's one and the same, Middleborough and Brockton?
Right, they have 2 fair licenses, each for
Yes.
15 days, but they're both run at the Brockton Fairgrounds.
Okay.
And then the next item on the agenda is Suffolk Director of Parimutuel Operations, Jim Alcott, has submitted a request for their premium-free period on harness simulcasting. That's per Chapter 128C, Section 2.5. They get a 12-week free period. Usually this is included in the application, but I've talked to Steve O'Toole, General Manager of Plainridge, and he doesn't have any objection to it. So my recommendation is that the commission approve the request from Suffolk Downs to have May 17th through August 8th of 2015 designated as their premium-free period for harness race simulcasting.
This is essentially pro forma because it's a statutory requirement. Is
Yes.
that right? Yeah.
And this is normally included in the application from last year or this year?
Right, normally, it would have been in the application.
From last year.
From last
There
year.
were too many moving pieces then.
And we didn't end up getting that application.
Yes, there was
this
the
year.
provisional and then we later,
Right.
yep. But the dates, the premium-free days are for this year.
Correct,
It's going back on
right.
what already
It's
happened.
retroactive,
They're retroactive to May 17 to August 8.
yes.
Oh, that's an important point. Yeah. Yeah. So this is retroactively approving the premium-free days.
Yes.
Does that result in a reimbursement of money, or does it result in
Likely a settlement, right?
Yeah,
You
it
know,
was a
some
settlement.
kind of
The tracks
reconciliation.
settle back
se-
and forth.
Yeah.
back and forth between the two?
Yeah,
All right,
kind of
okay,
reconciliation, really.
okay. All right, any further questions about that?
No.
Do I hear, excuse me, do I hear a motion?
Yeah, I'd be happy to move that the commission approve the request of Suffolk Downs to have May 17th through August 8th of 2015 designated as their premium-free period for harness racing simulcast signal.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? I hear none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And the ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, Doctor, thank you very much. And that brings us to the final agenda item, General Counsel Blue.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I am here today to discuss with you the schedule for the issuance of the Section 61 findings for MGM. The draft Section 61 findings have been provided to MGM and to our consultants. Our consultants have also received the revised MGM design plan. Our consultants are reviewing the revised design plan against the current draft Section 61 findings and also against the RFA2 application as well. MGM is reviewing the draft 61 findings in light of their design change. So there are certain parts of the draft that we provided to them that were based upon their prior design. So they're reviewing that on their end as well as we're reviewing it on ours. MGM's MEPA certificate required an agreement with the Massachusetts Historical Commission, and it requires Section 61 findings from MassDOT. MGM is working with the Springfield Historic Commission and the Massachusetts Historical Commission to finalize that agreement in light of the revised design, and they expect to meet on that and discuss some of that this week. MGM will file a notice of project change with MEPA this week. with the goal of having it published in the Environmental Monitor on October 19th. Once it's published, there's a 20-day comment period and 10 days for the Secretary to issue a revised certificate. On this schedule, the certificate would be issued on or about November 18th. When MGM files its notice of project change, they will send a copy to the commission, and we will give it to our consultants, so our consultants can factor that into their review of the overall project. We will incorporate MassDOT's Section 61 findings by reference into our Section 61 findings when those findings are issued. We do keep in touch with MassDOT to determine where they are in their process. If their findings are finished before we finally issue ours, we'll incorporate them physically into the document. Otherwise, they'll be incorporated by reference when they do come out. The Commission will receive revised draft Section 61 findings for the review prior to the November 19th Commission meeting. Our goal would be to try to get to you a revised draft so that you can be prepared to discuss it at the November 19th meeting. Some of those, it's a little bit tight, so some of those things may or may not be within ours or MGM's control, but we're going to try to shoot for that date. If the Commission, and the consultants will also come before you on November 19th to present the results of their review. If the Commission is comfortable with the revised draft Section 61 findings, it can consider them and vote to accept or approve them at that particular meeting. If you believe you need some more time to review those, you can certainly approve them at a future meeting, and we can schedule an additional meeting if we need to do that. The next filing date for the Environmental Monitor is November 30th, so it would be helpful if the Commission's Section 61 findings could be ready to be filed within the Environmental Monitor on that date. And then once the Commission Section 61 findings are approved, you'll sign them and we'll file them in a signed form with the Environmental Monitor. MGM will also file them as well. So we're looking at a schedule that would hopefully get us through this entire process by sometime in early to mid-December, and then would allow them to move forward on their project.
All right. Comments, questions? Let me just say that for those watching, the few who may be unfamiliar at this point with what all this is about, this is all has to do with the Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act process. The Section 61 findings are a reference to Section 61 of the relevant statute, and we are required, given the nature of the conditional nature of the license that we issued, to review before, after the certificate is issued by the Secretary of Environmental Affairs, or in a case of a project change, after a supplemental certificate is issued. We're required to review the entire project again thoroughly before we issue the findings that Section 61 of the environmental statute requires us to enter, so requires us to make. So that's what this is generally about, and I say that because we're going to be talking about it again in another venue in a minute. But with that, Tracy, were there some questions or issues?
So the notice of project change at this point is the documents that come with the notice of project change that will help our consultants and staff review are anticipated to come on October 19.
It's anticipated to come this week, so I would,
Okay.
when it's filed, we'll get it, but October 19th, if they meet their environmental monitor date, yes, we'll definitely have it by then.
Okay, but we don't have yet an indication on the level of detail or quality of those documents?
Well, I have Council
Oh.
Nozel here to discuss it. We do have a general sense
Okay.
based upon the design change.
Yep, okay,
Commissioner, you'll have a copy of the notice of project change today.
okay,
So that'll be filed with the commission today.
okay.
And that will go through meeting the MEPA requirements for that particular document. It'll go through the documented changes, assertions regarding no further or increased environmental impact, and an overall reduction for purposes of evaluating that document in terms of the MEPA certificate process.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor, can you just add in MGM's timeline or schedule of meetings with the local agencies and authorities?
Sure. It's my understanding, actually, tonight, the members of MGM Springfield will also meet with the Springfield Historic Commission to go through. They've had a previous meeting 2 weeks ago to go through the proposed changes, and really are focused around 73 State Street as well as the Union House Hotel to determine what, if any, additional changes need to be made with the current draft of the MOA. Also, simultaneously, and I'm going to be intentionally less specific about the actual dates on this, but it's my understanding that the company will also file its package of design changes for purposes of seeking approvals with the city through the city council on or about, I think, the 19th of October, but at least certainly prior to the end of October. At that time, we'll also provide those documentation to the commission as well, so it has a full package.
Well, that's an important point. The historic commissions have a role in the approval process, but so do the city council and the office of the mayor. So those are approvals that are required as well.
And we've spent a lot of time with staff talking about not only the sequencing, but the coordination of that.
Right.
A lot of these materials have, I'll suggest, double utility. For instance, the notice of project change is going to give you a very detailed description of the way the project is changing. Certainly for the purposes of MIPA, but will be helpful in analyzing your Section 61 process as well. And then the final design package also, I think, will address any outstanding questions regarding what the design will look like.
Okay.
All right. Further comments, questions about that? So that we actually can start from a planning mode, at least, once we get the notice of project change, to use that as a basis for revisions, initial revisions, at least, in the Section 61 findings that we've drafted and already circulated.
Yes, that's correct.
Right, right. So we'll move forward on parallel fronts.
Yep.
All right, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Deputy General Counsel Grossman to speak to you about our transfer regulation. We've discussed this in the past, and he'd like to update you as to where we are on that.
All right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We just wanted to update you as to the evolution of these regulations. After the last meeting, we took a step back to reconsider the approach we were taking to these regulations. We were able to discuss these with some of our consultants and receive some valuable input from others. And at the ultimately, what we will look to do at this point is to reorganize the language of the existing transfer regulations to adjust the location of a lot of the provisions from a separate standalone transfer regulation into an enhancement of our existing qualifier regulations in large part, and ultimately ensure that we have mechanisms in place to address the number of transfers of certain interests that may occur with our gaming licensees and their parent and intermediary companies. Ultimately, we have a number of types of transfers. We have transfers that may occur by way of contract, by way of purchase of securities on the open market. We may have a transfer of the property itself, or even an option to purchase one or more of those interests. So ultimately, our goal is to have, as I said, mechanisms in place to address these, to allow the commission to evaluate the transferees for suitability, and ultimately also to allow the commission to evaluate not only who the transferee is, but what their intended plan is for the interest. So with that, we're presently working on an updated draft. Hope to have a version to you at some point in the next week to evaluate, and then move that language along to our licensees and other members of the public who may be interested to offer input as well. And then ultimately here, I think we're going to have to put this back out for public comment and through the promulgation process, since we're changing the section number and the general approach we've taken with this regulation. It's no longer a standalone transfer regulation under Section 129 of the regulations, and it seems only appropriate to move it back through the process again, even though much of the language is the same familiar language you've seen in the past. And so that's the plan that we're proposing.
So by moving it into the process, meaning restart the hearing comment period and
We'd have
et cetera?
another public
Another
hearing,
public
another
hearing.
opportunity for comment. It, in theory, could move as much more quickly, since everyone has seen much of this before. We've obviously accepted a great deal of public input to this point, which has led us to this updated version.
Yep.
So hopefully, it would be a much briefer process than we've experienced in the past.
That's also my guess.
Yeah, this is a really interesting process. This one started out on one track, and it was triggered by the Commonwealth share. That was our focus, Commonwealth share language in the statute, which is Delphic at best. And we were focused on that, trying to figure out where that meant, spent a lot of thoughtful and very creative energy on that, and finally concluded that as a matter of policy, at least tentatively, we didn't want to go there and have a Commonwealth share, and that raised questions about how to revise this. So the end result is a regulatory approach that's vastly different from the one we started out with, and therefore it's only appropriate to start the formal hearing process all over again. So that's, Mr. Grossman has done a great job of going with the ebbs and flows of this process here, but it's been a fascinating one.
Yes, it's been quite an evolution with some twinges of revolution
Right, right.
involved, and so we've made it to
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, we'll look forward to the next product and the next iteration and a good discussion of that when it comes forward.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Same here. Thank you.
So the last item under the legal section today is I wanted to discuss with the commission the process for reviewing the wind design. And as we've discussed before, the commission makes two separate approvals outside of their section 61s for every project. One is an approval of the construction schedule. The other is an approval of the actual design itself. And we are ready at this point to start the process for the review of WIND's design to eventually lead to an approval as we roll it into the section 61 findings. So this is it's a separate but somewhat related process to the section 61 findings. We think in this particular situation, it's a little bit more related and important to do it in the order in which we're doing it here. The purpose of the design review is to compare the current design to the design that was proposed in the RFA2 application. WIN has provided plans describing their current design, and those plans have been provided to our building and site design consultants. The consultants are going to come before the commission on October 29th and report to you their results of their review of both the proposed design and the current design. The consultant's report will be available as part of the commission package, and the reason we think this is important is because this will allow the public time to review the current design and the consultant's report prior to the commission's public hearing. And as you might recall, the MEPA certificate requires us to hold a separate public hearing on the MEPA certificate, on our section 61 findings, and take public comment before we finalize our section 61 findings. So I think this will be important for the public to be able to have the design, have the report, and be able to understand what the project looks like. In parallel with the design review, the commission will staff will work on the section 61 findings. As we talked about before, the MEPA certificate has very specific requirements, both for us and for MassDOT, in terms of what we need to do. On the commission side, we are required to hold a public hearing and solicit comments on our draft section 61s. The MEPA certificate requires MassDOT to complete their section 61 findings within certain timeframes, so we are also tied somewhat to the Mass DOT timeframes as well. We will be able to put together a more detailed schedule for the commission in terms of timing like we did today for MGM. We're not quite in a position to give the commission exact dates as to how things will move, but we think the design review process is the best first step. And then we'll stay in touch with MassDOT to see where they are, and we will probably have some sort of schedule, maybe towards the early to mid-November, a better idea of where we'll end up.
That's very helpful. There are essentially, as I understand it from that, 4 steps in this. The first of those steps is taking a look at a close look, the look we're required to take at the actual design proposal on October 29. And we'll all get a chance to look at it, ask questions about it, hear from the consultants, but we won't take a vote on approving it or any part of it that day. That's basically an informational piece. Then we really have to wait for MassDOT, Massachusetts Department of Transportation, to do their environmental findings. Once we have those, we incorporate them into our environmental findings, draft environmental findings. Then we have a public hearing, and people will, by that time, have the information gained from our review of the current wind design, our consultant's review, the Mass Department of Transportation Section 61 findings, our draft Section 61 findings. All of that will be out there for people to know before they come to the hearing. Then we have a public hearing, take comments, make whatever changes in our Section 61 findings are necessary on that, and then promulgate them, and that's how we move forward.
Yes, that's correct.
So we have a great deal of opportunity for people to see each step of the way and ultimately make comments on the aggregate of the various steps we're taking before we're finished.
Look forward to that.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting process. It's a good process. It's a process that very thoughtfully outlined in the Secretary of Environmental Affairs certificate that allows for public input and that treats a regional problem as a regional problem and gives an opportunity to try and come up with a plan to address that, as well as taking a look at the immediate plans and getting comments from the public about that. So it's a good process. All right, anything further on that subject or others for General Counsel Blue? All right, good.
And that's all we have.
Thank you. Any other business before the commission that we should deal with? There's nothing more on the agenda, so I think we should deal with nothing else.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, do I hear a second on that?
Second.
All in favor, say aye, and the ayes have it unanimously. We're in adjournment. Thank you all.